Hello, good afternoon, National readers. My name is Laura Webster. I'm the editor of The National, and I'm joined here by Xander Elliards, who is one of our content editors and also a political journalist with us. Now, we last brought you a live stream, I think, maybe like the week that they had announced the election. I'm sure we're looking significantly more aged and exhausted.
More great.
Yeah, we're tired. But it's a week out from the election today, and there's actually been a lot of news this week. Because the football has been on, I feel like it's been very up and down of when we're really getting some interesting campaign news. But this has been a good week for political news if you're interested in political news. So, Xander, do you want to kind of give us a bit of a roundup about what we might have a chat about just now?
Well, before we do, I think just what you're saying is quite interesting about like how it's actually been a good week for political news, because I mean it is the general election in 1 week. We would be expecting a lot of political news. We'd be expecting like policy announcements to be leading the agenda, which we did have very early on. Like it or lump it, that is what the Tories did with their national service pledge. They led the news agenda, and ever since then, we really haven't had much in the way of policy. I think really it's because Labour are keeping extremely quiet, because anything that can shake the polls, they're keen to just basically get to polling day, aren't they? And they don't want to do anything that might cause controversy or get them criticised or anything like that. They're quite happy just to be safe and quiet and cross the line and no doubt end up with a historic majority. The Tories, of course, are too busy fighting fires to actually really be announcing any policies. But yeah, I saw that John Curtis was saying that he thought this was a reason why we've seen a lot of polls in the last couple of weeks. And that's been a really dominant narrative of the campaign. It's been what's this poll saying? What's that poll saying? Oh, another poll. We literally have like 3 polls a day sometimes, and 2 polls a day yesterday, I think it was. It's just polls. And that they're filling a gap which would in an ordinary general election campaign be filled with policy. But
yeah,
what do Labour have to offer on the policy front? Change, more of the same, but
just the word change 100 times on the side of a bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't matter.
So yeah, it's been strangely quiet on that front, I think, this general election campaign. But yeah, last week there has been a lot going on. The betting scandal, obviously Labour are now fighting fires in criticism for not campaigning in areas where a lot of people think they probably should be campaigning. And Rishi Sunak seems to have just kind of given up the ghost altogether. I mean, we had Steve Baker earlier today basically say that he's going to run for Tory leader after the election campaign, which is
another Tory leadership election campaign. Just
we're going to have the Scottish Tory one anyway, so we might as well get the other Tory one out of the way at the same time.
Oh my God, I know. It's nonstop. I mean, I hear sort of political theorists talk about how we're in an age of kind of never-ending crises. You know, one crisis ends and another crisis begins, whether that's like climate crisis is an ongoing one, or like an economic crisis, or like a political crisis. And that political crisis could be an internal party one as well. And I feel like the Conservative Party has been in an ongoing political crisis for years, effectively. But they just shapeshift in an attempt to make people not notice. But ultimately, you end up noticing because everything's gone up in smoke, basically. So, yeah.
The Tories in 2019, what they did, I think, with the Get Brexit Done, the fall of the Red Wall, they achieved that by basically bringing in a lot of people that would have voted Reform into the party. And that's then when they got their massive majority. A lot of these new Conservative MPs from the Red Wall, people in areas that hadn't voted Conservative for decades, perhaps even ever, were subpar, to say the least, because why would you nominate someone of real ability in an area where they have no chance of winning? So suddenly you ended up with a huge amount of subpar Conservative MPs that really shouldn't be in the Conservative Party. That wasn't a massive issue for them under Boris Johnson because they all thought he was an election winner, and that was great. But it started to fall apart once they finally had to get rid of him. And we're just seeing the consequences of that now. I think the Conservative Party's been split down the true Conservatives, shall we call them, and the Reform Conservatives. Years. And now Nigel Farage has entered the race. We're really seeing that split. We're seeing like when a ship sinks, like the Titanic, the iconic splitting in half, and then one half sinks, then the other half kind of floats on before it sinks as well. I think that's not a terrible analogy for what the Conservative Party is going through at the moment.
It makes perfect sense. And it feels like at the UK level, those are kind of the two stories of the election. One is the idea of this Labour supermajority, Keir Starmer being potentially the least popular Prime Minister ever elected as of next week, but with the most significant majority that we've seen in certainly a long time. It's fascinating quirk of a completely broken electoral system. And I think that's very much connected to the other part of the story, which is the appearance of Nigel Farage, the sort of surge in support for reform. Because when you look at somewhere like France, you could certainly compare Keir Starmer to maybe a bit of a Macron type in sort of domestic policy. And all that's happening in France now is that the far right has increased its support. So it does feel pretty scary. There's some comments in about how people are really concerned about immigration being blamed for all of our problems, and it's being seen in Europe as well. Daniela, I totally agree. And I think that is a part of the election that maybe Keir Starmer has been too scared to really confront, and has found himself leaning into those kind of bits of rhetoric when asked about it. So pretty concerning times.
Starmer's been doing it for years, hasn't he? It's that fear of the red wall, of the Reform voters along the red wall, the people that voted for the Conservatives in former Labour heartlands in 2019. They're so scared of putting a foot wrong with these people that they just given up all their moral principles. I think Jonathan Ashworth on the BBC over the weekend when he well, it wasn't over the weekend, sorry, it was Monday night, I think.
It was news night on Monday night,
yeah. When he refused to rule out a return agreement with the Taliban. Obviously he hadn't been given a Labour line on that, so he was asked a question he hadn't been fed the answer to and floundered, because these people don't have principles by which to check how they should be behaving. Instead, they're just looking to the party leadership, which again doesn't have any principle. It's entirely, we just need to get into power so that we can run the country. That's the be all and end all. I'd just like to jump back to what you were saying about about Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister with perhaps a historic majority, with perhaps quite a low vote share. I think there's going to be a lot of questions raised after the general election. I mean, if Reform outdo the Tories, they get 18-19% vote share. If the Tories get 15%, the Conservatives are still looking likely to get a lot more seats than Reform, triple, quadruple the number of seats. If that happens, there's serious questions about UK democracy. The poll on the front of the Scotsman today had Labour and the SNP neck and neck in Scotland. I can't remember the exact figures, but they were on the same percentage in vote share. But it would translate to a Labour majority of Scottish seats and the SNP on around 18-19. So these questions need to be addressed, I think, after the election. And Keir Starmer simply saying, well, I like first past the post and I'm not going to change it, isn't really going to be good enough. If the party across the UK that gets second in vote share becomes a minority in the parliament behind the Lib Dems, behind the SNP, behind the Tories, that's not just, say what you like about Reform, and the same for SNP north of the border. So I think there is an opportunity for Labour to bring in sweeping change that would benefit them in the long run. The proportional representation would benefit Labour in the long run.
They don't care about the long run. No, none of the parties care about the long term, Xander. You know that.
Yeah. Well, the SNP maybe arguably, because they want independent Scotland in the long run or in the short run. if some parts of the party to believe. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of questions after the general election, and essentially politics in the UK at the moment is just a kind of zombie land where we're all just ambling towards July the 4th, waiting for it to come in so that we can actually start talking about what that is rather than just listening to Starmer.
Wild times. I was going to say, my family, my mum and dad, they stay down in the north of England, and my mum messaged me today to say that Nigel Farage was in their hometown, and he had packed out an arena of 1,000 people to speak to them. Now, I'm not often seeing Labour candidates. I believe the Labour candidate in the area is actually a member of the shadow cabinet. I would be very surprised if she was able to pack an arena with 1,000 people. So it just kind of shows there is this surge in support for what I personally think is a pretty concerning party with pretty concerning aims and certainly concerning candidates. But speaking of candidates, I actually want to ask one of the questions that's in the comments. It's really interesting. And then move along and talk about this story that we broke yesterday about a Labour candidate in Aberdeen South. Now, this is a really, really, really good one. So one of our commenters asks, with the polls very close in Stormont and Rayner's seats, who do you think would lead Labour if both the clowns were to lose? Well, I don't think that they will lose, although I suspect a lot of our readers would like to see that. But I hear, bits of chit chat around the place about potentially Wes Streeting wanting to run the party and him being a potential replacement for Keir Starmer in the future. So I don't know if you think that would be better or worse, but
I think the Labour leadership, by which I mean the true leadership, Starmer, Morgan McSweeney, would be more than happy to see Angela Rayner out. I think she, remember, is in an elected position, not an appointed position. So they haven't really got any choice but to have her as deputy leader. I think they would be cock-a-hoop to see Rayner lose her seat because they would then be able to install a deputy leader that is much more on brand. Rayner is more left-wing than they would like a deputy leader of the party to be, I think.
Yeah.
That's
fair, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of deflection really for Starmer and a lot of the criticism that he gets. He can say, well, look, I've got someone from the left of the party here with me, and you can't say that I don't listen to them because she talks to me every day, kind of thing.
I mean, where is he going to put her in cabinet? Can you not give her a cabinet position? I think that's what they want to do. I don't think they want to bring her into the cabinet. I don't think they want to give her a top level position at all. I mean, there's precedent. The SNP's deputy leader Keith Brown is the minister. He's not in cabinet or anything like that. He did used to be, but so I mean, we'll have to see how big the majority is because people that are going to be elected, James Kelly in the National today did an analysis piece on the polling in East Lothian, what's likely to happen there. And he concludes that basically Douglas Alexander is a shoo-in. He's going to be back. It would be very unusual, I think, not to see Douglas Alexander brought into a high-level position in a Labour government.
Foreign Secretary, maybe?
Yeah, so who's going to get fired? Is David Lammy out? Is Ian Murray not going to get the Scotland Secretary job? I can't see that happening. So there's going to be some really interesting shuffling among the Labour bods once the election happens. But that's all we're really going to have for years and years now. It's just going to be Labour.
Wow, Xander, I'm sure you've really cheered up everyone in the comments. Yeah. Let's discuss something a bit more fun. I mean, this is a pretty shocking story. It's fun in the way that we have covered it, I would suggest. Now, Ring doorbells, what a blessing, that we are the journalists who live in the era of Ring doorbells. So I don't know if our viewers have seen this, but yesterday, in fact, maybe I could show it. I could have a look at showing it, but yesterday, we published a video that we obtained of the Labour candidate in Aberdeen South going to a voter's home and telling him that in 2019, Scottish Labour didn't bother in that constituency because they were hoping that the Tories would win it. It's pretty crazy. I mean, a lot of people knew anyway that the Tories and Labour are very close in Aberdeen. Now they ran that council together, even though it got them suspended from the party. They have worked very closely over the years, but it's really the first time that anyone has kind of been caught on camera saying what everyone suspected, isn't it?
What everyone knows.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exactly the same, basically, as we're seeing in Clacton, in Nigel Farage's constituency. Well, I say Nigel Farage's constituency.
Oh, Xander.
Where Nigel Farage is standing. Obviously, it's not his constituency yet, although I strongly suspect it will be. But Labour have given up the ghost, haven't they? They're not campaigning there. They don't want to campaign there. They don't care about campaigning against Nigel Farage because, as you said, like a lot of people will turn out to see Nigel Farage. A lot of people like him. And Labour don't want to upset the people that like him. So they're not campaigning against him. And they're moving the activists out of Clacton into seats where they think they can win. And they're doing it deliberately. And then they're turning around and denying that they're doing it, which is what Keir Starmer's done today, even though we all know they're doing it. So, yeah, it's something that Labour do. Of course, everybody knows they're doing it. But saying it out loud is what you're not allowed to do. Exactly. I think that's why, as you can see in the video that we have published of Malik, the Labour candidate in Aberdeen South, the way that he steps closer to the voter, the way that he lowers his voice.
Yeah, he's like he knows he shouldn't be saying it.
Yeah. So we all know it's what they're doing. We all understand that Labour are not interested in fighting some constituencies, but they would not say it. Anna Sawa in Hamish's story, which we've just published this afternoon, Anna Sawa has said that his own candidate lied to a voter right there and then. And that is seen as a preferable position to admitting that you don't campaign in some constituencies, which everybody knows you don't do.
No, I don't understand Sarwar's defense because he's saying, oh, it wasn't true. Effectively, he lied. Okay, so you're happy to have your candidate just like going around lying to people on their doorstep. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't sound good either. I think probably if we had had more time with him today in Kirkcaldy on the campaign trail, I'm sure Hamish would have pressed him more on that. But for those who don't know, these things tend to be quite tightly controlled when you're asking questions, how many questions you get to ask, how many follow-ups you get to ask and whatnot. Anyway, I've got the video here, so I'm going to show it for the viewers who maybe haven't already seen it. It's less than a minute, so it won't take very long.
I'm Malik from the Scottish Labour Party.
Hi.
I'm a candidate for a forthcoming election. Have you made your mind which political party you're voting for?
I think I'm probably going to be voting Conservative.
Okay. If you like to get rid of SNP, then please vote for me.
Right.
Although John is my good friend,
right.
We had a wonderful relationship when we were working together. I was hoping that he can win it because when we were a coalition partner, we had brilliant times, especially myself and Douglas Lumpkin.
Yeah.
But think about it, because the reason is we want to get rid of SNP. Douglas Lumpkin.
Yes, okay.
2019. We did not bother. Labour did not bother at all.
Yeah.
We were hoping that Douglas will make it.
Yeah.
That's why Labour had only 3,000.
Yeah.
We did not do anything.
Yeah.
Although John is doing, but please, as a tactical vote, it's only between me and SNP. And we want to get rid of SNP because we are very lucky we didn't get separation from the United Kingdom in 2014.
No, I know.
Otherwise, we were bankrupt within 5 months.
We can't.
So we're much better with UK. We cannot live without UK.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers. Bye.
There you go. It's so good. It's such a good watch. I just can't believe how lucky we are to have been blessed with a Ring doorbell on that doorstep with that conversation taking place. Really.
He's obviously not lying, is he?
That doesn't seem like a lie.
No,
I mean, obviously you could argue, well, he's talking to a Conservative voter. He wants to appeal to someone who maybe has Conservative beliefs that, you know, Labour are not too far away and not too dissimilar. But I don't know. Is that a great campaigning strategy to say, don't vote for that party because we're just like that party, to vote for us instead?
I actually think it's a pretty terrible campaigning strategy considering where they are.
Which is Aberdeen.
It's like, realistically, if you want to get rid of the SNP, as Malik says he wants to do, in Aberdeen South, you should be voting for the Conservatives. Every vote for Labour is going to make the SNP win more likely. Again, that's something that James Kelly said in the constituency profiles that we've been running, looking at the constituencies across Scotland, how they could go. in the general election. And if the unionist vote doesn't quite know where to go, then that helps the SNP. Like in the borders, it's obvious you vote Tory. In Aberdeen, you would think it's obvious. So to have Labour up here muddying the waters and saying, in 2019 we wanted the Tories to win, but this time the Tories want us to win. I don't think that's the case. I think it's I don't think it's doing either of their parties any favours, and it is actually helping the SNP.
No, exactly. It's funny how it all works. There's so many different angles you've got to think about these things from when it comes to kind of calculating the electoral arithmetic. So Xander, in our description on our video, we said that we're going to talk a little bit about election bets. So why don't we finish our chat with some reflection on that? Do you want to update our viewers today?
God, it feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? The election bets. Alistair Jack saying that he won £2,000 on the election date, which, maybe he did. Maybe he was joking. So what happened was Rishi Sunak called the election on May 22nd, and almost immediately after, Alistair Jack seems to have made a comment to a BBC journalist about how he won £2,100. One of his bets was odds of 25-1. And he seemed very chuffed with himself. He'd been apparently going around saying he thought the election should be in May or June or July for a very, very long time. Apparently doesn't see any issue with betting on the date of a general election, which is set by someone that you see daily, have private conversations with around the cabinet. Apparently he doesn't see any issue with that. Apparently it's all completely morally above board. But I have to say, Alistair Jack's statement when the BBC published that story, I did not place any bets on the general election during May.
Yeah, during May. I was like, why is that there? I mean,
can you imagine Bill Clinton, like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman during May.
Yeah.
Like, well, when did you then? Which was the obvious question. When did you place these bets then? And he's come out and he said that he placed 3 bets and he finally won £100, which seems suspect. It seems suspect. So who makes a joke? Who makes a joke about winning £2,000 on the election and then says actually it was only £100 and it was all? It's very, very suspect. But Jack doesn't care, does he? He's out now. He'll be in the Lords soon.
Yeah, he turned down his peerage, so does he not need to be on another list? But I'm sure he will be.
He'll be on the Rishi Sunak's resignation honours, I imagine, won't he? Because he didn't take the one when Nadine Dorries did because he wanted to stay on as Scottish secretary and stay as an MP, I think. But I mean, the one thing about the betting scandal is how just normalised and ubiquitous it seems. I honestly didn't realise how many politicians were just having flutters on political things all the time. Like Alex Cole-Hamilton saying that he bets on elections. It seems like as a matter of course. I mean, that Tory, they bet $8,000 on him losing his own seat. That is an insurance policy if I've ever seen one. It's like, oh well, I lost the election, but at least I got the whatever the odds were, like 3-1, $8,000.
I'm pretty shocked by it because it's not something that people really talk about. It's certainly never come up in a chat I've had with a politician, but then I don't know. I guess it depends what kind of a journalist you are. If you're like an older male journalist who maybe bets on football from time to time, in the conversations you have with politicians, like around the parliament, maybe people are going to say, oh, have you done any betting recently? I don't know what men say to each other. It sounds ridiculous, but you know what I mean. They may be more likely to be more forthcoming with people who are more like their peers. But I was really surprised to hear about it. And I think that the public will be really surprised as well. Yeah. And I think that this is going to just keep growing and growing because it's a really big ethical dilemma, isn't it? I mean, it would be so strange for anyone else in the course of doing their work to make bets on the results of the work that they were doing. You wouldn't accept a footballer to place bets on his own team. So it's really weird.
Is at least the footballer putting bets on their own team. Well, I guess they could throw the game, but like a football coach putting bets on their own team or anything like that, they can't so much guarantee the result. Whereas Alistair Jack, literally one of Rishi Sunak's closest colleagues, like cabinet level colleague. He is as close to insider trading as you can possibly get. It's frankly shocking that they consider this okay. Like just going around saying, "Well, I'm not under investigation by the Gambling Commission." It's like, well, that doesn't make sense.
I thought Alex Cole-Hamilton's response to it was just bizarre. Like he obviously thought, if I'm really forthcoming and I say very publicly at the start of this that I have bet a lot on elections, that's going to look good for me. But obviously people were kind of just like, that's crazy. So in response, he said, well, it's not North Korea. I'm like, well, I think there's maybe some space between people being a bit upset with you about this and the country becoming North Korea.
Yeah, but to be fair,
that just means it's so normalized within political circles that people who are in those political circles are shocked that it's upsetting to people.
You could bet pretty safely on the North Korean elections. Do they even hold elections? But you could bet pretty safely who's going to be in charge of North Korea next week. Whereas I think, yeah, it's just completely unethical what they're doing as far as I'm concerned. And well, we will see. I bet I would like to see a landslide that wipes out the Tory party in a way that we just aren't going to have to deal with this kind of morality anymore. Just a real slate clean, new parliament, new parliamentarians, none of this buddy, 14 years in power. We've been laying these networks and friendship it's just beyond the joke at this point. The UK needs an entire reset. I don't think Keir Starmer's offering it, but at least it's going to be something different from this Conservative government that has just gotten so far beyond morality that they honestly think that they can just do whatever they like. And I think that's the betting scandal. That's why politicians are saying that, political experts are saying this has got as much, if not more, cut through than Rishi Sunak leaving the D-Day commemoration, which I thought was pretty astounding because the D-Day commemoration scandal was massive.
I think I agree with that because it's money, isn't it? And I feel like anything to do with money and how money is spent and how money is exploited, it just taps into people's like psyche in a way that other things don't. And I think I can see this growing into a really massive scandal. I certainly think that there'll be an inquiry post-election, and I think that inquiry will produce some pretty fascinating information, to be honest.
I don't know. I reckon they'll probably just sweep it all under the rug and keep going.
I don't know. I just feel like it's everywhere. And so there's going to be so much to come out. And also everybody, if you want to get a story into the paper, if you're having a problem with a former boss who's been voted out of office, then it would be a good time to go and talk to journalists about how they were betting on every local election in the parliament.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but whether or not the interest is going to be there, whether or not everyone's just going to have a kind of attitude like they've very much got to Liz Truss now, it's just, well, she's gone, we don't have to listen to her anymore, we're not interested in what she's saying anymore. I think the entire Conservative Party might find themselves in that situation very, very soon. But yeah, we will see.
Keep an eye on it, but I do suspect that it will keep growing, and obviously we'll keep working on it and see what we can find out about it. But I don't know, people may be getting a bit secretive at this stage, realizing that people are not particularly happy about it. Well, your alarm means that you're supposed to.
So we've overrun. I was going to say as well, it's just a big whole. I can't say what I'm thinking.
We all know what you're thinking. And I like how you get to use our StreamYard chats of analysis to just like have a bit of a rant about
exactly.
It's all in good fun. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and we'll be back either tomorrow or at the start of next week. If you haven't already, make sure that you've caught Leslie Riddick's First Leaders interview. She was interviewing Lorna Slater for the first in the series. Today, live in the evening, it will be Alex Salmond, and then you can read that in the paper tomorrow or watch the full video online tomorrow morning. And Saturday is Stephen Flynn. So make sure you've caught all three. They're really interesting interviews. And Leslie isn't afraid to pull any punches. So there's a few moments when we were recording them when I was kind of like, ouch, like Leslie, she kind of went there. So those are great to watch. We've also got the Richard Murphy economics interviews. He was interviewing the economic spokespersons for ALBA, the SNP and the Greens as well. So those are all very much worth your time. We've got all the constituency profiles on the website. So if you want to know about your constituency or your old constituency or your neighboring constituency, you just couldn't find out any more about constituencies than you can on the national.scot at the moment. So there's tons and tons of election coverage. And of course, next week, we'll be bringing you everything that you need to know about the election. Our team are going to be absolutely fueled with as much caffeine as we can reasonably consume. And we will be up all night bringing you all the information that you need. So don't worry, there's only a week left of enduring it, and we'll keep you sorted until then. But thank you so much for joining me today, Xander, and I will see you soon.